Hello everyone, my name is Zachary Bruce, and today I'd like to give you a speech on the importance of law enforcement in the United States of America. And not just the importance, to be honest with you, I'll leak some statistics. Well, not leak, but I'll share some statistics with you that affect the everyday life of officers in the United States, as well as general law enforcement. I guess overall I'd just like to inform you about it. Now then, I'd like to begin. First thing I'd like to touch on is enforcing laws in a free society. You know, as Americans, we can be very stubborn. We know our rights, right? Evidently, we've all read the Constitution. And sometimes, when these attitudes clash with law enforcement officials, uh, it's not generally the best thing for a civilian to do, you know. Obviously, the officer knows your rights. I would make the assumption they've been well trained, and hopefully you as a citizen would know your rights. But we have to remember something. Enforcing laws on free people is not easy. It was never meant to be easy. But the point still stands that law enforcement officers have to do so. They must do their jobs. The criminals have to be arrested, or people that are suspected of a crime must be arrested and be put through the criminal justice system. Now, as I've said before, in a free society, that's never going to be easy. You're going to have bull-headed, stubborn people that say, well, that might be the law, but let me tell you. Well, folks, there is no let me tell you, okay? Obviously, another point, I mentioned the Constitution. The officers are sworn to uphold the Constitution. So even as a bull-headed citizen, per se, you might think, well, I know my rights and this, that, and another. But, no, you see, the officer too knows your rights. And I would think that generally, most non-corrupt officers are not going to do anything to you or put you in a position that would violate your constitutional rights. After all, we have to remember, these officers are sworn in to uphold the Constitution and to know the rights of the citizens they serve and protect. I'd like to move on to my next point. Now, in recent, I should keep up with this more recent, I don't like to, but unfortunately, chances are, if you've turned on the news in the past, few years? Heck, just this last year alone, just these past 2 years alone, you'll see a lot of officers being unfortunately shot and killed, or killed. They don't have to be shot, by cop killers. And once again, I'd like to state, these are people that are just bullheaded, per se, and perhaps they think they know their rights better than the officers. Perhaps they have a vendetta against the officers. Perhaps every day they live their life in defiance of our law. Point is, it seems like more and more officers, almost each time you turn on the television, are dying in the line of duty, mostly being shot. We know in recents with these wild shooting sprees that the American people seem to have just lost their minds. Not literally, but hopefully you understand where I'm coming from with this. But the point is, the statistics are in fact lowered. Now, don't get me wrong. I believe any officer that is shot in the line of duty, that's a life too many. That's an officer that shouldn't have died in the line of duty. But unfortunately for us, things don't always peg out that way. We can't have a perfect statistic. And it's very unfortunate for these families that these officers have to die in the line of duty. But I thank God for them. Not that they died, but that they cared enough for the citizens and the law and the people to protect us to the point of death. But let me dive into these statistics and let me not ramble. Now then, over 20,000 names are enrolled on the memorial in Washington. Now you have to remember, these 20,000 names of the fallen officers cover a span from 1791 to today, 2015, the present. And, as I said before, thank goodness, this is a decreased statistic. Now, by my note cards, which you obviously see that I'm checking, through the decades, the first 6 months of the 1970s, they claim it's the first 6 months from 1970 to 1979. I wouldn't think it would go into 1980. That's not what the article that I read said. But it said in the first 6 months of the 10-year period of the 70s, the 1970s, there were 62 deaths in those first 6 months. So that's just over 10 deaths a month. That's very upsetting, folks. Like I said, I would think ideally there would be no deaths. That's what I'd hope for. But in this year, 2015, it is down 13%. There's been 30 shootings last year and 26 this year of officers. That's astounding. That's wonderful. That means that statistic is down 13%. Just think if we could get it to 3%. I'm not 3%. The overall total to 3%. Heck, for that matter, just think if we could lower it 3 more percent to 10%. How astounding would that be? But as we know, unfortunately, when these officers are sworn into duty, they know that this is a repercussion. You may lose your life in the line of duty, but look at why you're doing it. You're doing it to protect your citizens, to uphold the laws. And although I don't want to see no officer die in the line of duty, I thank the Lord that these officers are that devout to these laws and that they take their oath that serious. Now, before I switch gears here, I'd like to point out that police killed during Reagan's first 6 years, the number was 1,129. And if we look here, we can see that police killed during Bush's first 6 years was 1,034. Now that's down from the years of Reagan. Remember, 1,129 died during Reagan's first 6 years. I'm not one to make this a political thing. That's just how the statistic rolls. That's the pattern of the statistics. And if you notice, during President Obama's current time in office, the statistics down even more. During his time in office so far, or I believe it was his first 6 years in office. It had to have been his first 6 years in office. The statistic is but 807 officers have died or been gunned down. And that means that is a 39.9% decrease in when President Obama has been in office, as opposed to the highest that I have dated on these flashcards, which is during President Reagan's reign, when the number killed was 1,129, as well as during President Bush's first 6 years of reign, when it was 1,034. Now, I don't know if that's Bush Sr. or Jr. I would think Sr. The article didn't specify, but I'm not here to point the fingers. I'm just here to give the statistics. I will, however, change gears here for a moment and point out that obviously the way these officers have to uphold the law now, as opposed to 20 years ago, perhaps even a decade ago, perhaps even more. I like to think 20 years ago. But obviously the times were different. Two different times, obviously. So perhaps this has something to do not with how not just with how an officer would enforce law then and now, but perhaps it contributes to the statistics then and now. And just let me start off by saying, obviously, officers these days must be more globally aware of what's going on. You have to understand, with terror on the rise, with these terrorists, they have to be very well tuned to understand the anti-terrorist movement while still upholding constitutional rights of the citizens and still being able to serve and protect the citizens. Obviously, I did some research and I found that decade ago, 20 years ago, obviously, they say, and this one shocked me, folks. I would think that, obviously, on a nation that spends so much military-wise, I made the assumption we would spend a lot on our police forces. I mean, that's our county and city line of defense, obviously, But officers then versus officers now have officers in the past had less training, less money, and less resources. Made it incredibly difficult for them, obviously. I think that was a big statistic of officers dying then versus now. If you look now, the statistic's lower. But if you look during the 70s, or really just during Reagan and Bush's reigns, more officers were dying or being killed. Perhaps that has to do with less money, not as effective training, less resources. Perhaps that's all a collaboration. But, I believe that uh, no matter the times, the officers never lost their sense to protect, their sense to uphold the Constitution, their sense of pride, obviously, for their job, for their community, for their laws. And I mean, obviously we have to question, is training better now than it was then? I'm sure it is. I mean, as a society advances, I would, as I said before, I would make one of the many assumptions that next to military, police force would be one of the things that grew. They expanded their knowledge. They added more to the force. They improved their weapons. They improved the technology they use. They improved the cruisers they ride in. All of this done to make an officer's life more, I don't want to say valuable. The officer's life should be more valuable by default. But to give the officer's life a better chance in the line of duty. And I'm just going to wrap this video up with saying I feel that the importance of law enforcement in the United States is to to bring criminals to justice. I suppose I could use persecute, but I choose not to. As well as to keep anarchy off the streets. You had no law enforcement, you would have pure anarchy. I mean, think about it. If you were in a scenario where you were just robbed, but there's no officer to defend you or write the report, there's no criminal justice system to bring the criminal to justice, obviously. I feel like these key things are very important for law enforcement and are various proofs that law enforcement is important, not just in the United States of America, but all throughout the world. Obviously, law and the legal system, the criminal justice system, are very basis of our society and our foundation. And that's why I wanted to share not just the importance, but inform you of some of the statistics that these officers have to face in the daily life. And maybe, just maybe, these statistics help you understand not just the importance of what the officers do or why it's important, but the importance of their lives and what their lives mean, and how when their lives are applied as officers into the criminal justice system, how it defeats crime and anarchy, and how that improves our society and our communities and our towns. And just hopefully you took something from this speech, and I very anxiously await your comments, and I thank you.